Okay, let's see the world of Facebook and the world of lovely people sitting in Deep Ellum. Welcome to Creative Book Coffee number 2. Now, next month it might be Creative Book Cocktails or Creative Book Coldies, you know, as we say in Australia, they're like that. I'm going to try something because, like, I fundamentally don't like waking up early on Friday morning and coming and doing anything at all, particularly standing up and doing. But I do actually like doing this. So anyway, it's always good to meet new people. New people have registered today, and hopefully there's some folks watching online as well. I'll just keep coming up to the camera and doing that just for some visual flair. So Creative Book Coffee 2, basically 2 books over coffee and some community and discussion. We're going to shorten the book summarization part today and just get into some discussion questions, which we'll say bye-bye to our folks watching online this month, and then maybe next month we'll make it more interactive. We'll pull the camera up at the table and people can participate in that discussion. So what's the point of this whole thing? Inject some creativity into life and work. So this is not just for people whose job title has got creative in it. It's for people that work in all sorts of life and charity and business and art and whatever it happens to be, and help sustain and increase that over time by building a community around it. And fundamentally, just having some time, at least every month and hopefully every week, where you can sit down and think about the creative process, get some new ideas, revitalize it, keep it going. So community tools, tips, catalytic material and discussion, which is what this is going to be. I thought that sounded really good, but it just sounds pretty lame when I say it out loud. But that's a catalytic material. It's going to ignite your creative passions, everybody, and some discussion. And coffee, but maybe cocktails next month. So 2 books. How do I pick these books? These are best-selling, well-known creative books. I read them and then try and pull out the main points for them. So this month, we've got Still Like an Artist by Austin Kleon, who now lives in Austin, which is funny because he wasn't from there. That's out in 2012. And then Anne Lamott's Bird by Bird, which is 1994. It's been around for ages, but a very solid book if you are a writer or are thinking about being a writer. Now, has anyone read either of these books? What about Bird by Bird?
I haven't read Bird by Bird.
Yeah? Okay. So Still Like an Artist, very good, very popular book. So who is this guy, Austin? American artist, designer. If you read about his kind of history, you like comics and you like graphics and you like text and you wanted to put him together, that's been his history. He started doing this blackout poetry where you get like a sheet of newspaper from the New York Times, and then you black it all out and make poetry out of the remaining words that are left. He was posting that on his blog and basically got some attention from that, and it was asked to do a keynote, and for that keynote the theme of it was Still Like an Artist. And that led to his first book. So what's this book all about? Well, I think it's about reframing your role in the creative process. Like, you know, if you just look at the title, you can go, oh, you know, it's all about art's all about cutting and pasting other people's stuff. But really what this is trying to say is don't sit there all day trying to be original and producing nothing. Just recognize you're part of a community and a history of artists and thinkers. Jump into the mix, jump into the swimming pool, do your own part, borrow from others, put your own personal spin on it and then put it back, and then through the process of doing that you become original. He talks about creativity like a gumbo. You take a bit out, you add your personal spice, you put it back in the... He also talks about it being a mashup, and there's a few references there to Jay-Z and other people. Now, I'm not sure how cool Austin Kleon is. I don't get the impression that he is particularly cool. No, neither am I. So my dad dancing, we might do some of that in a second. But he's got lots of nice cultural references there to kind of support. And the book is a very fresh, you know, kind of current, easy to read book. It's short, sharp, and he lives by his own mantra, which is creativity is subtraction. So I think this is a great book to recommend to somebody to kind of level set and to give them a quick shot of creativity. And it also references Bird by Bird, which is the second book that we're going to talk about. So I'm just going to go through the key concepts and takeaways real quick, and then we're going to get into some discussion questions after we do this for the second book as well. For me, one of the things about this is take inspiration from everywhere, art, architecture, nature, wherever, other artists. And I think for me this is the biggest difference in my own mind from being a regular civilian on the street and then starting to do my own creative projects, is that I look at the world completely differently. I look at things and I get inspired by them, and it makes me think about things, and I get small ideas in conversations and seeing things which I can store away and influence me later on down the track. Either directly, I'm going to try that out, or sometime months or years later, it'll put a little spin on something you're trying to do. And I think that's other people in the room as well. Yeah, some nodding of heads. I think the second key point is, a lot of people say I want to wait till I know myself. I've got to get my own voice. I'm not going to produce anything or do anything at all until I've got my own style and my own voice. And he says, well, look, in his experience, it's the act of actually making stuff and doing the work that we figure out who we are, not the other way around. I think that's good advice as well. Trying to see what our heroes saw. So this is the point about what to steal like an artist, with the emphasis on that, is look at your own heroes, musically, artistically, but then find out who influenced them. He talks in the book, and also if you read Twyla Tharp's The Creative Habit, which is one of the books from last month, she talks about kind of digging into the references, going further, following up individual things that caught her creativity, find the links to that, the references to that. One book leads to another book, and then all of a sudden you're in the territory of new inspiration. Write what you want to read, not just what you know. A lot of people say write what you know, and in our discussion, I think it's a balance of the two. You should definitely start with your own life experiences. That is a valid and valuable source of insight. But also don't say, look, I've only worked at a restaurant my whole life, so I can only write a book or do art about restaurants. Clearly that's not the case. The style and the subject of the things that interest you, and even your escapism, you can use that as a source of what you want to design, as opposed to just what you directly experience. And also side projects are important. Play, I think, is so good as well. When I don't know whether this is conclusively true, but do artists procrastinate better than other people? And by better, I mean more productively. And how can you procrastinate more productively? That's what I want to know as well.
There's actually a TED Talk on that.
Well, there should be. You heard it here. Otherwise, this will be next month. How to procrastinate more efficiently and effectively.
Right.
So what are these side projects? Your mind wanders, you want to look at something and become fascinated on the internet, and then you pick that up and that becomes a new inspiration, or even becomes the central thing that you're trying to do. So my own personal takeaways, things that I thought were kind of non-obvious, or just something that you don't always hear, that were useful to me personally. Creativity as a collective, kind of seeing yourself as, even as a beginning artist, as being as a lineage of people that have come before you and those that have come after. And that only works, of course, if you put your stuff out there that you've produced, and which is his second book, actually. Maybe we'll talk about that another session. I talked about this thing, this was not in the book, but it's in an article about the book, an interview with Brian Eno, the early synth pioneering musician, and he talks about genius versus seniors. And we have this idea of creative genius. It's an individual working away in a dark room and producing, this kind of Da Vinci model of this genius model, Michelangelo model. And Eno talks about seniors, being in the scene at the time where people are bouncing off each other and they're incubating and new ideas are coming up, and a lot of people are doing a similar thing, but only a few of them are recognized in the history books. So the importance of the scene, and I think, coming back to last month's discussion, the importance of a creative community. You never know when you're going to be inspired by somebody that does something completely different to you, and likewise any other way around. He says, steal what resonates with your soul, so the things that really deeply connect with you when you're So what's good stealing? Good stealing is stuff that you really care about. You go, that's amazing, and it's transformative, as opposed to, oh yeah, I could just do this or that. He talks about, I think there's a picture in the book about analog and digital desks. He actually has 2 desks in his studio. He's got one that is just a paper and craft supplies and sticking things together desk, and that's where he gets all of his ideas, and then he takes them over to the computer, which is in a second desk in the room, to kind of type it up and capture that digitally. And I thought that was very good. And again, last month we talked about creative habit. I say, I always start off my morning during the week, usually in some sort of diner around Dallas that's not too busy, with my notepad, and I do all my writing and ideas and creative thinking there, and then I switch on my computer. I try not to look at email in the morning. I have a quick glance to see if the house is burning down or something like that. Someone sent me a text or an email about that, but then I do not read any administrative emails first thing in the morning. So I like that idea of analog and digital desks, and maybe even building on that. If you're stuck, go into analog mode, and you could even extend that out. And I know we've talked about it, Chris, as well, with getting outside. How do you balance that? Okay, productivity at a desk, but also a different type of productivity, which is getting out and about and into nature and doing something more analog. And get over blocks by placing constraints. So that's the last thing that I thought was very good, and Alan Mott talks about that in Bird by Bird as well, which is sometimes you need when you're stuck, you need to go microscope. She talks about the 1-inch frame, and even in Steve Pressfield's book The War of Art, he tells a story in there about when you're trying to write a student was trying to write a story about the town that they grew up in, and they didn't know where to start. So then they said, okay, well look, the teacher said, reduce that to one street, describe the street you talked about. He goes, oh no, I still don't know where to start. We'll talk about a house. And he goes, oh, I still don't know where to start. Okay, we'll talk about one brick. We'll just start with that, describing that one brick in the house, and then that unlocks the story, because you've got you can write a page just on one brick, and then obviously from there. So that's what I thought. That's Still Like an Artist, already a short book. That's my talking very quickly, 1-page summary. So let's do Bird by Bird. So who's Anne Lamott? American author. Her first book was inspired by her father, who was also a writer, his brain cancer. And death has inspired a number of her works, and maybe connected with that, or not surprisingly, dark humour permeates this whole book. She's got a great sense of humour, and I think after kind of a little bit of a slow start to this book, it gets going, and she covers a lot of quality material. This is a writing class fused with a memoir and even a spiritual guide in this whole thing. It's full of practical tips, particularly for beginners and onwards, and there's some beautiful writing in there. So I found that after I got over the start, each chapter was really well structured. There's practical tips there, and I found myself laughing out loud a number of times at the book, which is always good, because books about writing can be really dry sometimes. Yeah. Her point of view, everyone can be creative and should do it, if only for the pleasure of doing it, right? She talks a lot about trying to disavow beginning writers that are thinking about getting published and going off around the world doing book tours. She said that's probably not going to happen, but you should enjoy and even if it does, it's not going to change your life in the way that you think that it will, but you should enjoy the process of writing, and that's a gift for everybody. Cleon's point of view is that everybody can be creative if they open themselves to the right influences and work hard. So that's just a contrast in their 2 points of view. Both believe people can be creative, but a different spin on it. She had a quote which said, one of the gifts of being a writer is that it gives you an excuse to do things, to go places and explore. Another is that writing motivates you to look closely at life as it lurches by and tramps around. And I thought this was nice. I mean, there's a million different quotes in the book, but it's just this point again that the difference between being a civilian and being an artist is that you pay attention to the world, and it becomes material to you, as in it becomes content and inspiration for your own creative work. And I think just making that transition to actually get to that point, you have to do some work to switch on the antenna, to move from consuming to creating. one of the great gifts, I think, is actually this ability to be present and pay attention to what's going on. Key concepts in this book, lots of very practical ones. Too many to sum up in 5 bullet points that I've got here, but let me have a go at that. Short assignments. Very, very good, right? Where do you start? By writing the whole book or just describing one scene? Give yourself short assignments that are just small set piece things, 1 or 2 pages, and do those. Just get started on the small stuff. And she talks about shitty first drafts a lot, which I think is a great turn of phrase. But it's true. It is so true. There's that other saying, that the first draft of any book is for the author, and then successive drafts are for the reader. Right? You've just got to get this whole thing out on the page, and then you can start moving it around and improving it. And but just get that first draft down and know that it's going to be shitty in her terms as you're doing it. But you've got to go through that process to get to the second and third and fourth drafts. We talked about the 1-inch frame already. This kind of scene, memory and exchange. Just describe, look at the, when you're stuck, just put a tiny 1-inch frame and just describe just that one little element of your whole scene in detail. She says it's not about publication, it's about telling the truth. And I think this was great. One of my takeaways from the book was just about this, what's the purpose of writing, not only communication, but helping us know ourselves and sort of communicate truth, knowing who we are. She's definitely comes across as being, kind of quirky, neurotic, jealous, hopeless, hopeful mind. And I think that's kind of her shtick that she establishes at the start of the book. Maybe I haven't met her, maybe that's how she is. And she does that with good humour throughout the whole book. And I think a lot of writers will go, oh look, maybe it's just me. No, most writers are a bit strange, and I say that having being a writer as well. It's one of the things that I do. I certainly can relate to a lot of the things she talks about in the book. Getting out of your own way, perfectionism will ruin your writing. Perfectionism is an oppressor, and I think that's just so great as well. We all like to, the time to be perfect is kind of, after you've already started and after you're aiming to improve, rather than as a means to stop you from doing anything at all.
Who said it's a finished, not perfect? I think that was a Inktober guy. I don't remember his name. But it's the whole mantra, right?
Yeah. And she talks about how will you know when it's done, and basically it is done when it's done. You can see all the problems that remain in it, but you get a spiritual, existential feeling that this is now done and it's time to move on. I thought it was quite good. And don't pretend you know more about the characters than they do. And I think this is a lesson, this was a concept for me, because I think, in trying to write, particularly when you write from what you know, based on people you already know, your characters can be really two-dimensional sometimes, as opposed to creating that character as a fully formed person and then letting them tell you what the story is. That's really hard to do. A lot of people are in writing because they're like, oh, I want to create this world, and then push people around like pawns on a chessboard, whereas that just can't work. It's artificial and it's uninteresting, I think. So there's a whole chapter on characters, but don't pretend as the author that you know more about characters than they know about themselves, which I thought that was cool. So my takeaways, sit down every day. Wow, this is in both books, and certainly gels with personal experience. But certainly for writing, that you need to sit down and write every day. You need to draw every day. You need to take photographs every day. And that keeps you in that frame of mind, the artist's frame of mind. Do short assignments. Her view on procrastination is just keep sitting at your desk, just sit there, keep trying to write, force yourself to do it, and eventually things will get going. So my takeaway also was writing is sharing a gift, sharing truth with other people. And I think that's a sweet, maybe an accurate way of describing what writing is and can be, that or art can be, is that you create something and it's like a gift to the world, you're putting it out there. So I think that completely changes the whole attitude to life. There's probably a life lesson in there somewhere. because it becomes less about you and more about what you're giving to others. And the last one, just a real obvious thing, is capturing dialogue. She talks a lot about index cards, like Twyla Tharp was all about those boxes. If people remember from last month, she was all about getting Twyla Tharp, Creative Habit, getting those big archive boxes and just putting all the research and stuff all in the box and letting it marinate together. Lamott's all about these index cards. Get them, write things down all the time as you see them. Capturing dialogue, which is something that I've just started doing now. It reminded me about it in this book, which is keep an ear out for dialogue, particularly for scenes and characters that are not you, not what you're familiar with. And just write those down. Write those down. I was getting a haircut the other day and there's all sorts of people going there, this real traditional old school nose place, and it was wonderful. I love going there because there's just some great discussion, people talking to each other, and it's just very real, and it's very different than most of what I hear during the day. So I got some great things there that I'll file away, and so capture dialogue, hear things, write them down, and that will help you later on. So that is it for the summary part. These summary slides will probably get up in one form or another online. We're going to go into a comparison of the two paradigms between the two books, if you want to call it that, and have a discussion for people that are in the room. So say bye-bye to the people that are online, and next month we're going to bye-bye people online, bye-bye, bye-bye. And then next month, or next time we run this, we might try a different format where we can actually show everybody in the room and have someone manning the terminal to get comments coming in from online, which you didn't have this morning. So sorry if you've commented online and haven't responded, but stay tuned and thanks for joining us. See you again.